All right, with Liberty.me, I'm Kyle Platt, here with Dr. Steve Horwitz and Max Borders at the Foundation for Economic Education booth. It's a pleasure to see you all again.
Good to see you too, sir.
Good to see you.
So, I thought that these are two people who would answer this question better than most. If we could theme a slot machine or casino game after one prominent thinker in the libertarian tradition, or one of their theories, what do you think it would be?
I want an Ayn Rand slot machine that has, instead of all the little fruits, just has letters, and it only pays off when it comes up all A's.
I can't top that.
That's pretty good. So, on your way up here, you decided to take advantage of the time that you had on the flight, etc., to read Piketty's book, right?
Yes, I did.
All right. So, first thoughts?
Well, you know, I was at the session yesterday on Inequality that was part of the fee day, and several people there said, I was shocked to hear them say exactly what I was thinking. I shouldn't be shocked, which is it's remarkably vacuous. And I don't mean like the data problems that people like Phil Magnus and Bob Murphy have pointed out. The actual level of argument is so shallow and so superficial, and there's all these interesting things about inequality, about institutions, about the role of family, about income dynamics and mobility. That's just nothing. Again, I'm only halfway through, but there's just none of that, and particularly for me, the stunning lack of attention to institutions and the way in which institutions matter for talking about equality, inequality. Just none of that. It's as if there's this very shallow theory and all this data, and the data is questionable and the theory is shallow, and he's got a story he wants to tell. So again, I'm only halfway through, but that's my first reaction. Interesting.
Max, you've written a book on inequality, Superwealth, that's very interesting. It offers up an interesting argument. What's your take on the equality argument?
Well, I have many takes. So there's a take per chapter in the book, but I can give you some highlights. I mean, one of the things I try to emphasize is that we should that it's okay to be concerned about poor people, but thinking about worrying too much about what the rich have versus what the poor lack is problematic. In fact, it could be that the more rich people we have in the world creating value, the better off the poor are. So that's a real important point, and the sort of having inequality in society may be a necessary byproduct of helping poor people rise out of poverty. I try to really unpack this distinction between having a positive sum state of affairs and a zero sum. You know, zero sum thinking is there's a bunch of rich people with a bunch of money and they're hoarding it, and we have to transfer it to these poor people. It doesn't take into account the economic ecosystem in which these processes arise. So you really have to do that, and I try to do that in a book. I even use the metaphor of the rainforest. There are differential distributions of resources in a rainforest. To go back to Steve's favorite band, Rush, you know, you don't want to cut down the trees to equalize everybody, right? So, I think, you know, those are some of the major lessons. I also, in part of the book, get pretty deep into the question of how this stuff actually works in terms of flow systems and why we don't want to mess with the functional aspects of quote-unquote inequality. You can't fetishize the distance between one income level and the other income level. You have to look at the reasons why they're there, and you have to look at the conditions of the least well-off in society and ask, are they better than they would otherwise be? That's the critical question.
Max's last point is exactly it, and again, that's the other piece missing so far from the Piketty book, which is it's all about inequality, and I've yet to see the argument for why inequality is so bad, which other commentators have said really isn't there. But for me, the question is what's happened to the least well-off? You know, and Piketty says at the start this kind of Rawlsian argument that inequality is only justified by social utility. But it seems to me important part of that social utility is what it does for the rest of the income distribution, and even that term income distribution is problematic. But for the rest of the income earners, and so for me the focus is as Max said, on the least well off, and it may well be. In fact, I'm pretty convinced it's the case, at least in the real market, that the ability of some to earn a lot is a necessary condition for the improvement of the least well off.
Sure.
I wanted to add on something that Steve said, and I think this is the problem with people who take a lot of numbers, who are macroeconomists. They take a lot of numbers and they sort of glom it onto their narrative. I think the problem with this is using numbers as abstractions and policies as abstractions tends to lobotomize real people and the context in which they live. This is the problem across the board with macroeconomic thinkers, and nobody articulates this better than Steve. We've got in our movement and in our thinking, tell real stories of real people, the whys and wherefores and the market process, and the implications of certain policies on that in a more micro way than we've been doing.
How do markets make people's lives better off? That's and particularly the lives of the least well off or the average person. That's the story we have to tell, and that's not a story about why markets let some people become rich. Directly anyway, right? I mean, that may be the causal story, but we need to focus on how the ability for all to earn what they would like to earn makes it possible for the least well off to be better off.
Sure. Definitely. Fantastic stuff from Dr. Steve Horwitz and Max Borders at the Foundation for Economic Education booth. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right.